There are always two different people on the scene of every violent crime, at a minimum. There are always the attacker and the victim. And given that victims of violent crimes are disarmed by law, and that criminals by definition don't care about the law, what we have today in practical terms is a justice and legal and law enforcement system that disarms victims for the protection of criminals. And the announcement of a trial of capsicum spray for self-defense in the Northern Territory doesn't fundamentally change this equation. With or without capsicum spray, all that our politicians, police and courts are doing today is making sure that the victim in any violent incident is no match for their attacker. And if you suggest, as I do regularly and loudly, that Australians should be legally able to arm themselves for their own protection and the defence of their families, the objection immediately comes back, but the criminals will get the weapons too. Newsflash, the criminals already have them. And I'm not just talking about machetes either. According to breathless headlines from just a few months ago, Australia has over 1 million illegal guns. And sure, some of those are just Grandad's old rifle from the war, which didn't get handed in when John Howard tried to disarm Australia in 1996, and sits safely under the stairs somewhere. But many of those 1 million guns are in fact brand new handguns smuggled through our borders despite, or in some cases with the assistance of, the officers of the Australian Border Force. And if you go to any major public venue, let's say a large public event like a sports match or a concert or a big market, a big public place full of people like Victoria Market down in Melbourne, I guarantee you that you will have walked past multiple people carrying an illegal gun on their person, and you had absolutely no idea. When I was in my 20s, I played the bad guy in a TV pilot filmed in Texas. I was there for about a month, and Texas being Texas, everybody and their dog was packing heat. Out on the street, at the shops, in their homes, in the truck, guns were everywhere. And I never felt safer. My name is Topher Field. This is the Topher Project, and I help busy people like you to keep up with the world as it changes around you. I am 100% viewer supported, so if you'd like to see and hear more of this sort of content in Australia, then help me to keep the Topher Project going by buying me a coffee via the button at topherfield.net, or by checking out my books, DVDs, t-shirts and hoodies with a host of different designs, all available at goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. Okay, back to my time in Texas. I wasn't allowed to carry a gun in public myself, of course. I was only a visitor. And to be honest, I wouldn't have wanted to carry a gun without first spending some time down at the range to work on my skills, and also doing some study into the law, and in particular, interactions with the police, and how to make sure that if I ever did have to draw my gun to protect myself or others, that I wouldn't then in turn get shot by the cops when they showed up a half hour later. But that is exactly why they have a thing called a concealed carry license system over there in Texas, where you have to take a course where you learn exactly that. And what's interesting is that in most of Texas, outside of the huge metropolitan areas, which are off the scale in terms of their population density and just the number of people crammed into a small space compared to anything in Australia, outside of those densely overcrowded urban centres, the murder rate in Texas is comparable to Australia's. And actually, that's true of most of the United States, not just Texas. There are lots of US states that have lower overall murder rates than Australia's average. The issue is that the murder rate in places like New Orleans, Chicago, Los Angeles, and these other huge, awful American dystopian hellscapes, that murder rate is so high that it drags their national average up to way above Australia's rate. The thing is, those mega cities aren't comparable to Australia. We don't have that kind of density, that lab rat kind of entrenched welfare-dependent poverty and high density that leads to that kind of street violence. Well, I mean, we don't have that yet, which is why we don't have that kind of murder rate in any of our own cities. It's nothing to do with whether the weapons are available or not. The weapons are available. There's over 1 million of them, guns in Australia, illegal ones. We just don't have that kind of awful urban culture. If you compare Australia to the parts of America that are comparable to Australia in their density, in their scale, rural parts of America, smaller to medium-sized cities as well, from the US that don't have these awful concrete jungles, overpopulated, welfare-dependent gang culture districts, Well, then you discover that the average murder rate in the US is actually quite similar to the murder rate here in Australia, despite having vastly more guns in their community. But the moment you suggest that, because obviously violent attackers in Australia are already armed in any case, that the people of Australia should therefore be able to arm themselves for their own defence, you get howled down as some sort of maniac who wants to turn our cities into US-style Chicago hellscapes with bodies in the streets and blood flowing freely through the sewers. But that's just not how this works. We don't have that kind of population density. We don't have that kind of gang and drug and welfare dependency culture. And if you look at the US outside of those cities, it is comparable to Australia, despite the abundance of guns. Now, for a long time, Australia has been tripling down on the disarming of victims, as if that's going to help reduce our violent crime, as if violent criminals are going to one day say, oh, you're defenseless. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize. I'll go and pick on someone who can fight back. The current approach is literally delusional. We are protecting the most vile and violent among us at the expense of peaceful and law-abiding citizens. And the current approach has led directly to the kinds of nonsense that we're seeing right now in parts of the Northern Territory as well as in parts of Melbourne, with gangs of young men running riot, behaving as if they are completely impervious to any consequences for their violent crimes. Because they are. They are impervious. There are no consequences. Because we know that the courts will be infinitely harsher on any one of us, let's say a father who uses a weapon to protect his family inside their own home, the courts will be harsher on that man than what they are currently being on the thugs who are smashing down the doors to begin with. Our justice system has now become one of the largest sources of injustice in our country today. And that's not just for violent crime, that's actually for all forms of crime. Here's a thought experiment to illustrate. If someone steals from you something expensive, I don't know, let's say a mountain bike, an expensive mountain bike, and you had a tracker on that, so you know where it is. You can go to the police station, you tell them, hey, my stolen bike is over there. They'll shrug their shoulders and tell you that they don't do that sort of thing. They don't have the resources to go and recover stolen property unless it's like a car or something like that. So you're on your own. But if you then go to recover that stolen property yourself, and the thieves who stole your property try to stop you from getting it back, and there's a fight, and you win that fight, well now, the cops that didn't have the resources to go and help you recover your stolen property will suddenly have the resources to come to your house and arrest you for going and getting your property back yourself. Oh, you might object, but that's because it's now a violent crime. There was a fight. It's got nothing to do with it. You were using violence to get justice. In this case, the justice is the return of your stolen property. That's not a violent crime. That's violent justice. And before you object to the concept of, violent justice, no. Stop and think. Police use violence against non-violent people all the time in the name of getting justice. See, those police, if they came to arrest you because you went and got your bike back and you won that fight to get your stolen property, if the police came to arrest you for that and you said, no thanks, and you locked your doors, they'd smash their way in. And if you tried to run away, they would tackle or tase you, and if you fought to stop them from dragging you off to prison to punish you for the crime of getting your own property back, they would beat the shit out of you. They willingly, indeed some of them gleefully, use violence in the name of justice. They do it all the time. It's their job. The police will use as much violence as they deem necessary to bring justice against you, even justice for the crime of the fact that you had to use force to recover your stolen property that they wouldn't help you recover. They didn't have the resources to help you get your stolen property back, but boy, will they have the resources to punish you if you go and get it yourself. The practical reality of how our system works today is that our police protect criminals, whether that's by disarming the victims of violent crime or by refusing to help recover stolen property and then prosecuting those who go and do it themselves. The state is running a protection racket for criminals. And that is why we see such bold acts of violence, home invasions, carjackings, and all the rest of it, proliferating all of a sudden all around Australia today. Because the criminals understand that they are a protected species. Now, that's not a slander against any individual police officer personally. They are probably deeply offended. If any of you are watching right now, you're probably deeply hurt. How dare you? I became a police officer to fight crime. Sure, that's what motivated you to sign up, and I respect that. But stop with the idealism. Don't be naive. Look at the reality of what you do and what it is that you're actually a part of. I don't care about your intentions and how noble you wanted to be. That's nice, but I care about the results, and the results are that you are protecting criminals far more than you are protecting the victims of crime. And that's why I was very surprised to see that the Northern Territory have announced a trial of capsicum spray for self-defense. Now, that is honestly a pretty small step because capsicum spray is of very limited effectiveness. It is easily defeated by criminals. They just have to wear some ski goggles or something similar. The fact is that a little pressure can of foam is never going to deter criminals as much as a high-velocity cordless hole punch would deter those same criminals. Personally, I'd love a multi-hole punch for protecting my home and my children. Punching a dozen holes at a time is just more efficient, and the short-range nature of a multi-hole punch means that it's very unlikely to do any harm to anyone other than the thug who just kicked down the wrong door. But we're not allowed to do any of that. But if you live in the NT, then now your ever-so-gracious government is going to let you have a can of angry spray foam. Angry silly putty, which if you're lucky enough to get your attacker in the eyes as you're being hacked to death by their machetes, that foam might cause them some irritation and might cause them to have to blink and clear their eyes, which will buy you a few seconds with which you can kiss your sorry ass goodbye. I guess the other upside of victims having capsicum spray is that the residue will stay on someone's face for a long time, making it clear who the attacker was, which is useful because, well, you're obviously going to be dead, so you can't point them out in a lineup. But the fact that there's residue on their face will make it very easy for the magistrate to know that this particular person is one that they should definitely bail immediately back into the community because clearly they've suffered enough already. Or some such similar bullshit. You know how this works. If you can't tell already, I am less than impressed by this move by the Northern Territory government because whilst it does represent a welcome sliver of sanity, it is quite frankly a slap in the face when they have whole sections of Alice Springs and Darwin which have become violent no-go zones for anyone who doesn't have a death wish. But if you really want to know why I'm pretty pissed off about this one, check out this article by the ABC. It says that the NT government will consider a 12-month trial allowing approved members of the public to carry and use a low-percentage capsicum spray, because we couldn't possibly let them use the hardcore stuff, could we? For self-defense under strict legal conditions. And you'd better believe that if someone steps outside of those strict legal conditions, even under the duress of a heat-of-the-moment attack, if they get it wrong in any way, the law will come down on them far harder than it's currently coming down on the violent thugs that are causing the trouble in the first place. The Chief Minister of the NT, Leah Finocchiaro, said this is something the community have been asking us for just about every single day. I'll bet they have been. Which proves my point. The state in general, the government and the police in particular, are the reason why the public are disarmed and helpless in the face of these violent thugs today. The public get it. The public want to arm themselves. According to Ms. Finocchiaro, they are asking every single day because the public know that when seconds count, the police are just a quick stop at the donut shop away. What Ms. Finocchiaro is admitting is that she is the reason why the public in the NT are disarmed up to this point. And given how limiting capsicum spray is and how limited this trial is, I'm just going to go ahead and say that they are still disarming their own citizens in the NT in order to protect violent criminals. Ms. Finocchiaro goes on to claim, laughably in my opinion, that the protection of self-defense already exists in our system, but that's not true at all. What's protected is fighting back from an inferior position with inferior equipment at the last possible moment. If you actually were to make any sort of preparations for your self-defense, if you equip yourself with something that actually gives you an advantage over your attackers, or if you are proactive about your self-protection, then you are regarded as the criminal in the eyes of the law in the Northern Territory and indeed in all of Australia. So whilst a trial of capsicum spray in the Northern Territory is a step in the right direction, it doesn't fundamentally change the fact that in the Northern Territory, as in the rest of Australia, our politicians, Our police and our justice system are working harder to protect criminals than they are to protect victims. And that is why we're seeing the kinds of brazen violent crimes on the scale that we're seeing them in Australia today. And that is not going to get better until either our police and justice system actually start punishing the criminals, or until we, the people, are finally free to actually defend ourselves against them. My name's Topher Field, this is the Topher Project, and I help busy people like you to keep up with the world as it changes around us. And if you'd like to keep the Topher Project going, then please buy me a coffee via the button at topherfield.net. And if you haven't yet read my books about civil disobedience, Good People Break Bad Laws, which is about civil disobedience in the modern age, Good Christians Break Bad Laws, which is about the theology of civil disobedience, then you can get both of those books from goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. You can also get a DVD of Battleground Melbourne. Now, this is my award-winning documentary about how Melbourne went from being the world's most livable city to being the world's most locked down city, and about the incredible people who pushed back against all odds. You can actually watch this for free at battlegroundmelbourne.com. But if you'd like the DVD with the booklet that has song lyrics for the original songs that feature in the film, as well as other information about the movie, then grab the DVD while you're grabbing my books. Also take a look at the range of designs of t-shirts and hoodies while you're there. Thank you so much for your support and for helping me to keep the Topher Project going. Please like, comment, subscribe, and as always, stay free.